Are the habits that you live with every day that guide your life even really yours? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, where did they come from? Did you actually decide to do this? How did the thing that you do every day even start to happen once? If you're like me, it's probably not something you ever put a lot of thought into. But once you start to dig in and investigate, you might find that this stuff was programmed into you long before you ever chose them. And often you'll find that the routines that you think are normal are actually the things that are keeping you. And then you might ask yourself, if you never chose to do these things in the first place, why is it then so hard to choose not to do them? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, and I help high achievers just like you who feel stuck bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Traditional self-help doesn't work. It's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change, making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create routines, habits, and behaviors that stick so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. When you and I talk about habits here, we often talk about building better habits, building healthy habits, creating habits to better your life. But habits are everywhere. It's estimated that anywhere from 40 to 90% of your daily activities are habits or things that you don't actually consciously choose to do and happen without you actually deciding to do it. So, an interesting question from me to you is, if these habits are there, but you don't choose to do them, where do they come from? And if they are really driving up to 90% of your life, don't you think it might be worthwhile to figure out how they work and maybe even take back control of them? And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest, Anna Shilina. Anna is an expert in habit science and the author of the book Habit Freedom. And she's here to help you and I answer the question, how do you know if the habits you've built are supporting you or limiting you? As an expert habit coach, Anna helps people uncover the hidden patterns that keep them stuck and teaches them how to rebuild their lives around their values instead of the autopilot habits that have driven them up until now. In this conversation, Anna explains what she means when she says that all habits are limiting, and why that might not be a bad thing. Anna also explains why talking about habits in simple forms like good and bad can actually be keeping you stuck, and why changing our language around them and using words like limiting and expansive can help you see things differently and take back control. So whether it's habits around the way you eat, the way you exercise, the way you talk, or anything else that you wanted to change, this is a conversation that you cannot miss. And with that, here is my talk with Anna Shilina. What is habit freedom?
I love this question because I was so unaware th- how important it is to answer this question. I was writing the book Habit Freedom, and a friend of mine asked me on a walk, Anna, what is actually habit freedom? In my head, I was writing the book and I had been doing it for so long that I thought it was obvious, like it's freedom from habits that are holding you back, obviously. But that really made me think that maybe it's not so obvious to people that a lot of us aren't free to choose our habits. A lot of our habits have been installed from how we were parented, like how we eat or how we move. A lot of the our habits are also controlled by media companies and devices and marketing and all of that. And so it's about regaining your sovereignty and asking, what are the habits that I'm actually choosing that are creating the life that I really want to live? And what are the habits that maybe that I've fallen into that have been unconscious? And so habit freedom is this game of liberation, game of freedom. And there's these increasing levels of it. And this is why I write all habits are limiting. The question becomes, are you happy with the limits in our lives? Because without limits, we're just infinite potential floating around in space. So we need the limits to create things and bring things into existence. At the end of the day, it's about how free are you feeling with the habits that you have in your life. And if there are areas where you're feeling limited and you don't want to feel limited anymore, that's where the habit freedom journey and the steps that I outline and that I followed will help.
I appreciate you expanding on that. It's helpful for me to start to understand because that's not exactly where my head went when I first read the term habit freedom in your writing. But I would love for you to expand a little bit more what you said right there, that all habits are limiting. What do you mean by that?
I I have a client, and when he came to me, he says, I don't have any bad habits. Like, I'm all good. I have a great business. I have great friendships. I work out. Like, I eat well, like I'm good. And I looked at him and I asked him, well, how's your love life? And he like shrugs a little bit. He was like, oh, kind of, I haven't met the woman of my dreams. Like, I keep like meeting someone and dating them for a while, and then something comes up and they're not quite it. And I'm like, well, the habits in your dating life are preventing you from connecting with the woman of your dreams. And so we all have these habits that maybe we're unconscious of. We're focusing on the ones that we know we're good at, but um, we have these habits, like I said, that we are unconscious of because we all have blind spots as humans. Like, even myself as a habits coach, I have blind spots too. And so to understand that even if you have the healthiest habits, but there's still, it's like, okay, but there's still something that's limiting me. There's still something that I'm not reaching, or I keep having goals and I'm not attaining them, or they're not aligned. It's a result of habits. And the reason why I write it this way is because to help people move away from calling habits good and bad. I find that habits aren't good or bad because for one person, what's good for one person is bad for another. And most habits are okay in moderation. And so instead of calling habits good and bad, I like to call them limiting or expansive. Are they helping you get closer to your goals or further away from your goals? One of the first things I teach when clients come on board the habit freedom journey and the mastermind is that decisions are easy when values are clear. So, values are like, what's most important to you? What are your goals? And sometimes I can get a little vague. So, I like to break it down even more to help people understand that there are three areas of life. Each person, every single person on this entire planet has three areas, which is our health, our relationships and love, and our wealth. So when we start to understand what are our values, what's most important to us, what's most important to me in my health, do I want to live long and healthy and full of energy? What's most important in my relationships and what's most important in my wealth and career? And then we can start to see what are the habits that are supporting those values and those goals in those three areas, and what are the habits that are limiting us in those three areas.
I love the distinction of limiting versus expansive rather than good or bad. Everything is, it's more of a gray area. And as you said, one thing for one person is different for the other. So I'm very appreciative of your choice of words. I would love if you could maybe go into your values and how those have shaped your habits as a specific example for what it means. Because everyone talks about values. It's like, oh, yeah, what are your core values and things like that? We hear it in business speak, we hear it all the time. But I'm wondering how that specifically plays out for you. I am so pumped to tell you about my partnership with My Body Tutor. My Body Tutor is the world's leading nutrition coaching platform that helps people find their healthy weight and keep it forever through sustainable habit change. If you listen to this show, you know that we do not suffer from a lack of information. Most people know what they need to change. The problem is actually sticking to it long enough to see results. When it comes to diet, exercise, and getting in shape, My Body Tutor solves this problem by giving you customized plans, one-on-one coaching, and daily accountability. As a bonus for you, they are offering $50 off your first month. What makes My Body Tutor so unique is they offer daily accountability with a real human coach. That's someone to check in with you, talk to, plan with, someone who can help you when things are going hard. It's not Chat GPT, it's not some algorithm. This is a real human. I know because I'm one of them. I have been working with my body tutor as one of their tutors since 2020. With so much nonsense and misinformation and just bad actors out in the health and wellness space, my body tutor is helping people the real way. They are changing lives. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Check out mybodytutor.com, where you can see hundreds of testimonials and reviews. And remember, listeners of this show get $50 off their first month. Just click the link in the show notes or go to mybodytutor.com and tell them Paul from Change Made Easy sent you in your intake questionnaire, and you'll automatically get a huge discount. On top of that, they offer a money-back, risk-free guarantee. So this is really a no-brainer. And like I said, I really do work for them. So if you've ever wanted to work with me personally, you can even request to have me as your body tutor. How cool would that be? Once again, just say Paul sent you and get $50 off your first month, start with no risk, and see how the power of a coach with daily accountability can literally change your life.
Yeah. So when I started out in, say, school and college and growing up, one of my biggest values was connection and community. And one of my ways or strategies of getting to that value was through alcohol. And I don't know if it's just the society that the type of landscape that I grew up in, but it was normal. That's how people connected. They were no other ways. And so that value of connection then drove that habit of drinking a lot of alcohol until it started to become very counterproductive to that very same value. So eventually, my value was still connection, but the alcohol was holding me back from true connection. It gave me that superficial surface, like how do you let's party on the weekend type of thing, but left me feeling so empty and so alone and like also unhealthy, like from the hangovers and the eating crappy food because you're feeling crappy from hangovers. And there was this whole cascade. And so I had to rethink and re-strategize of how I was going to get to that value of connection, but without the alcohol. And to this day, my greatest values in life have been connection and freedom. So I like to structure as many things as I can in my life around those values. And as soon as I figured out that that habit of drinking a lot of alcohol and partying on the weekends wasn't supporting the value of connection anymore, and then I had other severe consequences and hit a rock bottom and struggled to stop drinking for about 7 years. I was sober curious and tried the different books and podcasts and programs and all sorts of things. And I figured out, I was lucky enough to get stuck in that habit so I could figure out my own route, my own road to this freedom, which I write about in the book Habit Freedom. But eventually, that's an example of a North Star of a value, but then the strategy of how to get to that value had to change as I evolved and grew as a person.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I've had a similar relationship with alcohol, very, very same story. Like, right, that's how we connect. I think that's similar in a lot of different places around the world. Growing up in New York City when I was in my 20s, it was everything was let's go out for drinks, let's go party, and it was almost like a fake level of connection that we think, like you said, like this is I'm connecting with people, I'm filling my social cup. But when we dig into it, it's not that real connection that we actually crave. But you said that part of what allowed you to kind of turn the page from that chapter in your book is, there's the hangovers, there's the physical part of it. There's like, we know that it's not healthy, and you can literally feel that when you get older, when you're 22 going out drinking versus when you're 32 or however old, feels very different. But
Mm.
how do you guide maybe your clients, maybe yourself, to start to notice these habits that, to use your words, are limiting rather than expansive when they don't have that very tangible physical aspect? Like smoking cigarettes, like I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine until I'm coughing up a lung. And that's sometimes when people are like, okay, I've got to change this. But all habits don't come with something like that. That's so like knocking on your front door and so apparent. So what do you do when it's not so obvious?
To be honest, most of the people that come to me, there is an obvious shift that they wanted to make. They've made that decision several times. They've maybe dabbled and read a few books on habits, or and so like nothing's stuck because they've worked on the surface. And what we do in Habit Freedom is work on the inner child, and really like, where did you first learn to escape the present moment, and where did you first learn that it wasn't safe to say like be yourself. And we would do like really deep work to go to the root cause. Like, for example, to give a personal story, way before I started drinking alcohol, I learned to escape the present moment through academia, and that was my way of dissociating from the conflict in my household. And so by the time alcohol came into the picture, it was great because I got the same dopamine, if not more, from just drinking versus having to score high on a test, or do well in school. And going to that root cause is the biggest difference I find, versus like, oh, let's just stop drinking for 3 months and see what happens. And this is why, including myself, I went back and forth for so long. For, like I said, for 7 years, I would stop a little bit and then go back. There does have to be a big enough why, because people only really change behavior from a balance of pleasure and pain. In fact, I can tell you, being a human behavior specialist for the last 10 years, I can tell you that all behavior is driven by this balance of pain and pleasure. So, as long as I associated more pleasure with drinking or eating food unconsciously or doom scrolling or spending days on Netflix or whatever it was, as long as the pleasure overrode the pain, I was going to continue that habit. Now, here's the thing, we have this beautiful thing called an imagination. And so, a lot of us, if we're really honest with ourselves in those quiet moments, we can delude ourselves and lie to ourselves very easily. Say like, oh, it's not affecting me that badly, right? But eventually, like, we all know that the drinking is not great, or the vaping, or the smoking, or whatever is going to catch up to us one day. People who like clients who aren't quite there yet, where that pain threshold is so high that they have to stop, the one thing that I get them to do is start to imagine what it's going to feel like in a year, 2, 5, or 10 years from now if they do continue. Because we can visit that rock bottom in our imagination without having to visit it in real time. So then they get the choice. Do you choose the pain of continuing the habit and eventually hitting whatever your rock bottom looks like? Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, it's all different for different people. Or do you choose the pain of shifting the habit today? Because here's the thing about these limiting habits, they all have to stop. And that's one thing I like to remind people, because they're like, oh, maybe I could do it. We don't think too much about the future. We'll figure it out someday. And tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, or the diet starts on Monday. But if eventually all seasons come to an end, all habits have cycles. They have, for me, I find they do have lessons. They are a coping strategy for lots of people, a numbing, a self soothing. And again, a lot of that numbing and self soothing does come from childhood, because we weren't taught to self-regulate and regulate in a healthy way, or cope with difficult emotions. And so what we do, we reach for the thing that's going to numb us out. So the biggest thing is actually activating that imagination instead of waiting for the pain to catch up with you, so that you actually have to make that change from a place of pain versus a place of inspiration.
Yeah, that's a great tool. And it's interesting as you're saying that, I'm actually thinking about myself, and that's more or less exactly what happened to me when I was younger and I was drinking a lot and I was partying a lot and I was living a less than ideal lifestyle. I had a moment where I thought about, like, how time just flies sometimes, and you think about, like, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's like a blink of an eye, and I remember thinking back, and it's like, I've spent 5 years like this. Like, it was from when I was, like, 22 to 27, and it felt like nothing. It felt like no time had passed. I was doing the exact it was like I went out to the bar one night, I was out till, like, 4 in the morning, came home, like, what it was like, and I was, like, reliving the same night over and over and over. It was like deja vu, and I was like, this has been going on for 5 years. And if it feels like no time has passed from 5 years ago, what would happen if the same thing happened 5 years from now? Like, I'm going to be in the same exact place 10 years later. And thinking about it that way was the thing that made me think, like, okay, no, I actually need to change today because I know myself and I can become very complacent. And it's easy to just take the path of least resistance and just coast. And that's what got me here. And so that's when I stopped drinking, stopped going out, stopped doing a lot of the other things I was doing, started investing more in personal growth, reading books, and yada yada. And that was a very, very much an inflection point in my life. But you mentioned, the inner child work, kind of digging into the root cause of why do I even rely on this habit to, as you said, numb, dissociate, which I think is important. But is there a middle ground before that where you can use a tool that you to regulate that habit, that negative coping mechanism, even if you're not exactly sure, like you haven't done that deep inner child healing to know exactly where it comes from? It's like, I know this thing is bad. I know I want to deal with it. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. And probably that's something that I need to figure out. But like right now, I just want to move forward.
So they are, for me, for example, when I stopped drinking, I went through a phase of eating a lot of sugar and then doom scrolling. So it kind of like the habits got less and less detrimental to my health in a sense. And I went through that addiction transference, they call it. That was part of my journey where I did have to find a slightly healthier habit. So I wasn't quite ready to go all in and uncover all that deep work and sit with myself and understand myself at the core level and really connect with my inner child and give her all the things and reparent her and give her all the things that she was looking for. What I needed was to ease myself off the really deep end, and that was in stages. Okay, well, like, alcohol is not going to be my solution for now. It's going to be sugar and then doom scrolling, and then eventually I got bored of the sugar because I didn't like the effects of those. I got bored of the doom scrolling. I didn't like the effects. Like, my brain turned to absolute mush from that. Like, I was just like, what is actually going on in here? And then once those started to wear off, and I then had to feel my feelings. And then I had to ask myself, okay, so where are these feelings coming from? And I do really believe in therapy. So I've worked with therapists and coaches and mentors for a very long time in many different areas of my life. And it's been so helpful to do that. But you're almost asking for a shortcut, and there is none, because at the end of the day, if you want true transformation, it has to come from that center and really understanding ourselves. And yes, sometimes that can be hard. And luckily these days there's so many communities and support systems and therapy is normalized and all of that to help us cope. But once those emotions start to come to the surface, once the numbing is no longer available to us, then what's left is, okay, well, where did I start? Where did I learn this feeling? Essentially, we're all addicted to being ourselves. That's the greatest addiction on the planet. And I borrowed this idea from Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a teacher of mine, where all of these feelings that we are trying to escape, whether it's shame or disgust or fear or sadness or anger, or these things that we're numbing with these limiting habits, we have an imprint of these from childhood, and then we create scenarios in our worlds. Sometimes we create them or co-create them or experience them many times over because we have that blueprint. I have a client, he feels disappointed a lot. That's one of his like childhood wounds. Like, everything is always disappointing. This person is disappointing him and that person is disappointing him and all of this disappointment. And he kept numbing this disappointment with his limiting habits, with overeating and drinking and everything. And the true change happened when we started, like, well, where did you learn to feel disappointed as a child? And how can we go back and help that little boy feel safe and not disappointed, and reparent that version of yourself? And then all of a sudden, the things that used to disappoint him no longer bother him, or if they disappoint him, it's not as drastic and as dramatic as it was. So I know we're so wired for quick fixes and immediate gratification, and it can be a scary thought to go like, oh, I have to sit with my inner child. But there are no shortcuts to that. And for that lasting transformation and change, that is the best path that I found. And I've done all the different courses and all the different modalities and different meditations and everything. And you can try to do the quick fixes, or you can go to the root cause.
Yeah, it makes total sense. As you said, we always look for the quick fix. It's a natural human inclination to want things now. We want things fast. And again, as you said, right, our predisposition is to move away from pain and towards pleasure. And so if we are in pain, in discomfort, it makes sense that we want the quickest solution to that. Now, the reality is, unfortunately, that those quick solutions often wear off just as quickly, and that the hard work that takes a little bit more time is the thing that actually gets you to keep it in the long run. The word I use a lot with my clients, or two words, are sustainability and longevity. I don't want a solution that's going to last for 6 weeks, 6 months, or even 6 years. I want a solution that's going to last forever. And so I come at every problem with that lens of like, how do we do this the right way so that we don't have to do it again? But no matter what we're talking about, there comes a point where you have to put up or shut up. You have to take the action. We can talk about everything in circles. There's theory, there's all this, but eventually you have to act. And when we talk about action, like we hear like willpower, motivation, grit, all these different words, but there is no, as far as I found, one solution that can get someone to actually take action. So how do you get people who are ready for a solution? They say they're ready, but they're not taking the action to begin to move in the direction to actually change their lives.
So willpower is great, but it's like a lighter. So imagine the purpose of a lighter is to light a candle. But if you try to hold a lighter down for long enough, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to burn yourself, and the lighter is going to burn out. So that willpower is like that lighter, where it's needed to ignite the next thing, the actual sustainable thing. But what is that sustainable thing? What is it igniting? And this is where a lot of people go wrong when they do rely on willpower motivations. They're not actually igniting the thing that's needed for that sustainable change, and which is actually identity. All right, it's that shift in identity. Who do you want to show up in the world as? How do you want to sit, walk, stand, present yourself, be, feel? And so one of the best things that we do with our clients is get crystal clear on that identity that they are embodying and stepping into. And becoming the new you compared to the old you isn't one decision, it's 1,000 different decisions. And this is where willpower is helpful, because it helps you make those 1,000 different decisions. And this is also where a lot of people go wrong, because they're like, oh, I made that decision and it's not working. We're like, no, 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 no. You're going to have to make the decision 1,000 times, if not more. And that's how it works. And then the old you that used to say yes to the limiting habits falls away more and more. And the new you emerges more and more and becomes that ingrained identity. So, really not shying away from envisioning like who you want to be in the world, and carving that identity and creating it, like really becoming the creator of your reality and of your identity, is that important part. And because it's hard being who you are, and it's hard creating a new identity. And essentially, you want to ask yourself, well, which heart do you choose? Are you going to choose the heart of staying as you are with your limiting habits, or are you going to choose the heart of shifting identities and doing the work?
Yeah, I love that. I love the highlighting of the identity of who is the person that you want to become. And it's interesting, right there and a few minutes ago you spoke about imagination, basically visualization, and this just highlights the power of the mind and how important and impactful it is for anyone listening to truly be able to envision who you are, what you want to be. If you can't picture it in your mind's eye, what are the chances that it will actually ever come to reality? Anything that was invented or ever created was created two times, first in the mind of the creator and then in reality. So that's the first place, the first step for everything. So I really appreciate you offering that, Anna, as a solution that's very tangible for people.
I'd love to expand on this because I feel that imagination, especially as we grow older, and with all the technology that's available to us, and even to a degree, like the whole self help industry, sometimes starts to limit our imagination because we start to rely on other people's tools and this 5-step process and these 7 effective habits and like what other people have written versus the power of practicing and training our actual imagination, which includes doing creative things like reading fiction books, imagining. I remember reading my first fiction books because I was so immersed in this world of like sales books and self help books and relationship books and just training. I just wanted to get better and better. But I had neglected my most powerful faculty, which was my imagination. So I remember picking up the book Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. It is a classic. It's based on architecture. And I remember getting so frustrated with this book because I was like, if only I could just see a picture of the buildings that they're talking about. And I realized that my imagination had gotten weak and lazy because if I don't train my imagination, how do I even, I can't create the life that I want to live. And that was such a huge wake up call. And I know the ridiculous irony, because life is ironic, of me in my nonfiction book, Habit Freedom, writing about the power of imagination and needing to read fiction, right? And less self help things. But essentially, that's one of the things that I want to inspire people to do is to break out of that mold and do whatever is going to spark that creativity and imagination, whether it's brushing your teeth with the other hand or painting something that you've never painted or doing something creative that you've never done, and like stepping outside of the everyday grind.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. I'm glad that you added that, thinking of your imagination like a muscle, and like anything else, if you don't use it, you lose it. A muscle you don't work atrophies over time, and our imaginations are the same, especially as you kind of touched on there with technology that has almost taken the place of our imagination now. And any times where we used to daydream or mind wander are now gone because we just have the infinite scroll. So if you don't deliberately go and put that imagination back, reading fiction is a great way, giving yourself the time and space to mind wander and daydream. It sounds silly to think of, but in our day-to-day life, where you go to work, you go to the gym, you take care of your kids, you do this, you scroll, like, it's actually been taken away from us, and it's such a natural part of the human experience. I think that it's actually very important. I appreciate you sharing that, Anna. So I want to finish with two questions that I ask all of my guests. And the first is, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
Radical responsibility. Radical responsibility is the thing that takes us from victim consciousness into being the creators of our reality, of our matrix. I actually write about how our matrix is created out of our habits. I almost see it like Everything we say yes or no to is like ones and zeros. It's like a compute, like a program that we're programming. I'm saying yes to going to gym, and so there's a one there. I'm saying no to this, so there's a zero there. And so there's this program, and it's all made out of yeses and nos and habits and behaviors and actions. And so to really become the master, because you don't escape the matrix, you create it. And the only way to create your own matrix and your own reality is through radical responsibility. So that's the one thing that I hope to inspire with the work that I do and the books that I write.
Yeah, it's an amazing concept, and the world can use more of that for sure. So, if you had one action step that listeners could start taking right now, today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, as soon as this video stops playing on whatever they're watching it on, for them to make whatever change that they're trying to implement in their life just a little bit easier, what would it be?
The one action step is to take your one hand, your right to left hand, and put your five fingers out. And remember these five words whenever you're faced with a decision of, do I go to gym or not? Do I eat healthy or not? Do I just scroll on my phone or not? Do I connect with this person or not? Do I have a difficult conversation or not? And these five words is do the hard thing now. So for those who are listening, I'm just pointing to the five fingers, and it's just a really easy way to remember the mantra. Put the one hand out and just touch each finger, and remember to do the hard thing now. The reason for this is because tomorrow it doesn't get easier. Tomorrow, in fact, it's is guaranteed to get harder to break free of the limiting habit, or to have the difficult conversation, or to make the change that you want to make. Because if you are if you are doubling down on the limiting thing today, then of course it's going to get harder tomorrow. In what universe does it get easier? So right now is the easiest that it will ever get to quit the vaping or the drinking or the eating unconsciously or whatever it is. So the five words and this mantra has transformed my life, and I try to make it as easy to remember as possible by just having my hand with me.
I love that, especially right there at the end where you said right now is the easiest that it's going to be. It's so true, and we put things off and put things off, and it only becomes harder over time. So I love that you shared that. Such an actionable step for listeners to take it away. Thank you so much for being here, Anna. I really enjoyed this conversation. If you're working on changing your diet, exercise, or other habits around food and fitness, you have to check out My Body Tutor. My Body Tutor is the world's leading nutrition coaching platform that helps people find their healthy weight and keep it forever through sustainable habit change. And you know, as a listener of this show, that when it comes to creating change, it's all about sustainability and consistency. And when it comes to diet, exercise, and getting in shape, My Body Tutor solves the problem of consistency through one-on-one coaching, customized plans, and daily accountability. And as a bonus for you, they're offering $50 off your first month. But what really makes My Body Tutor so unique is they offer daily accountability with a real human coach. And I know because I'm one of them. I have been working with My Body Tutor since 2020. There's so much misinformation, so much nonsense out there in the health and wellness space, but not with My Body Tutor. My Body Tutor is the real deal. They are changing lives. I've seen it, I've been a part of it, and I'm honored to continue to grow with them. And you don't have to take my word for it. Check out mybodytutor.com, where you will see hundreds of testimonials and reviews. And as a special bonus for listeners of this show, you will get $50 off your first month. Just click the link in the show notes or go to mybodytutor.com and tell them Paul from Change Made Easy sent you in your intake questionnaire, and you'll automatically get a huge discount. And remember, they offer a money-back, risk-free guarantee, so this is a no-brainer for you. And no joke, I really do work for them. So if you want to work with me personally, ask for Paul as your tutor. Once again, tell them Paul from Change Made Easy sent you for $50 off your first month. Start with no risk and see how the power of a coach with daily accountability can literally change your life.